And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be with us tonight. Those are in the chat room and those from around the world. Tonight we have with us Barbara Duncan.
Good evening, everyone.
And speaking of guests from around the world, where do we have listeners at tonight?
Tonight they're coming in from all over the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Belgium, Spain, and Japan.
All right. Welcome. Hope you guys are enjoying the show. And we have with us Jeffrey Gould.
Hello.
And we have back with us our two guests, John Milan. Milan. John Milan. Let me do this.
How soon we forget.
My. Put a long thing on there. Milan. Okay. And Gail Offen.
Hello.
I bet I got that one right.
Yeah.
50% club. Very good.
I wanna, it didn't even occur to me to ask. It didn't even occur to me to ask at the beginning of the show because, I with a name like Jeffrey with a G, the original British spelling, I'm usually very good about trying to pronounce people's name correctly. But when you see what clearly is a beautiful city in Italy, you don't think, oh, it must be a different pronunciation.
That's a good point. But as I'm sure Henry can tell you, Milan, Ohio is a pretty famous town. And Milan, Michigan, Milan, Ohio, I think that's where Thomas Edison was born. Isn't that right, Henry?
I'm pretty sure that's where it was at, yes.
Yeah. And I think there's a Milan in almost every state in the United States. And to your point, Jeff, I have imagined it was an Americanized version of Milan, but
Well, I grew up in a small suburb of New Jersey called Pompton Plains, and we had a town nearby that was spelled Bonton, but nobody pronounced it that way. We would always put a glottal stop in it, so it was always pronounced Booton.
Really?
Tootin', huh?
Yeah.
No kidding.
If anybody said Boonton, we thought, oh, you don't know, you're not from here.
You're not from there yet?
And Pompton Plains was part of Pequannock Township, and even though the original Indians, American natives that lived there were the Pequannoks, the township was called Pequannock, and that's how it was pronounced.
Wow. I see a whole nother show coming up here, I think.
Now you got a lot of places in this book we haven't even I begin to touch on.
And we could talk for hours.
The what? I didn't hear you. What?
Well, I said we could talk for hours.
Oh, sure. There's that many places. You got the Dearborn Historical Museum. That whole place is haunted.
Right. Well, in fact, before the COVID, I say the COVID, and Gail will laugh at me because my kids make fun of me when I say the COVID like I'm like 80. But before the lockdown, we did our last live performance at the Dearborn Museum, and it was in a room where they frequently have seances and so forth. Because they are notoriously haunted, some of those existing buildings from the 1830s. Well, I'm sorry, what were you going to ask me, though, Henry?
Oh, it's a museum, so I'm sure it's got a lot of articles in there that probably has some sort of an attachment.
Yeah, I think there is the Commandant's Quarters, which is the main museum building. And then there's what they call the McFadden Ross House, which used to be the Powder Magazine. At one time, the city of Dearborn was just a federal arsenal. It was a walled arsenal. If you were going from Detroit into the territory westward, that would be your last stop, and you would be leaving civilization forever. So for years, that was all that was there. And it was notoriously haunted even at the turn of the century. So they've done all kinds of research in there, and it's kind of a fascinating series of structures for for this federal arsenal to still be standing. And mind you, this is in the midst of all these modern, stores and things. I mean, it's just kind of, the city kind of just grew up around it.
Wow. Barbara?
But
Well, I was just going to say they were holding seances where you were doing these events. Did anything get triggered so that you were having experiences while you were trying to do your talk?
not that we were aware of, but we had heard reports that they had many times found they picked up voices in the McFadden Ross house, and they've had some actual they've caught some something on film in the commandant's quarters, some kind of an entity, and they've done a number of ghost investigations there. I'm thinking it's the Great Lakes Ghost Hunting Society. But while we were there, we were introduced to another group who came to our show, and they do a considerable amount of investigation at the Whitney in Detroit and Old Fort Wayne, which are probably both very famous for their hauntings.
Mm-hmm.
And they find all kinds of things at Fort Wayne and the Whitney.
I bet. Yeah, but speaking of museums, this photograph that in your book really caught my eye, and that is the nail figure.
Ah, yes, in Detroit at the Detroit Institute of Arts.
Yes.
It's a fascinating place, and people, you don't think of hauntings usually in art museums. It's really a wonderful art museum, but this Congo figure, it's a very fearsome looking thing, and it's considered one of the top things in that museum because it's very rare. It's from the Congo, from the 1800s. It's a figure, and it's actually interesting what it represents. It represents power and spirits, and it's nails in it, so it's this figure, sort of a fearsome looking figure with teeth and eyes, and it has nails driven into it. And that culture that lived in the Congo, they would go to it, they would swear an oath, and then they would pound a nail into the figure, and that was to seal the oath. And if you ever broke that oath, it is said that the figure would come after you if you violated that oath. So it was considered like a judge or a priest, and it's considered very, very spiritual. Well, this figure, which is, again, one of the most famous things in the collection, the guards there, this was interesting, we did not expect this, told us that sometimes at night they actually see this figure running around the museum. And as I like to say, if you look at this figure, I'd be scared if it was running around in the day. Forget the nighttime.
So it's not screaming "ay" or anything like that.
No.
It's a really scary looking figure. It's frightening. So, and another thing that we have in the book is there's this giant 20-foot painting called The Court of Death by Rembrandt Peale. It's in this one gallery. It takes up almost a whole wall. And sometimes at night, the guards will hear this crash as if the painting has fallen down. They'll rush to this gallery, and the painting will be up on the wall, and they'll be mystified. So, but this figure, this Congo nail figure, that's fascinating.
I was Jeff brought it up. It brings back memories of that Karen Black trilogy of terror.
But I didn't know how old your audience was. Exactly. Oh my God, it's totally Night Gallery. Yeah.
I hate that little. I hate that little thing.
That is something that has been brought up to us before. I think it's called Trilogy of Terror.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was actually made by the guy who made the original Dark Shadows, Dan Curtis.
Is that right?
Okay, that's interesting. Yes, it is just like that figure that haunted poor Karen Black in Night Gallery.
Yeah, people bring that up. Now, I think the nail god is probably just looking for a place to get its nails done. But
I avoided making references to all the elevator hangings as getting the shaft. So.
But it's interesting. Gail brought up, and this is right across the street, and about a block down, that the Whitney Mansion, which is a wonderful restaurant, and as Gail, I think Gail mentioned, it's the first place that had an elevator installed. And the elevator there is notoriously haunted. Now, no one was hanged in it, but it has a mind of its own. And
They've
when
had
we went
cameras
there,
on it, and it goes up and down after hours. It goes up and down, opens in various, floors and things like that. And so it's considered a very haunted place. That's another jealous. This woman wanted her husband, the lumber baron, to build the grandest house. As I said, it was built for $400,000 in 1894, which is $9.5 million today. And it has Tiffany windows. People don't realize that eat there. And she died before it was finished, so he married her sister. And so Flora haunts the place, and because she's very jealous, her sister got to live in this swank palace. And so they've named a drink. As I said, they named a drink for her. She's in the ghost bar, and she's seen there quite a bit.
Wow.
And John and I had an interesting experience there. This, I would have to say, is really one of the only paranormal experiences I've had. We were investigating the place, just walking around, and I was standing there, and John said, "Are you whistling?" John, remember that? And
right.
no, and we heard somebody standing right next to me, or John thought it was me whistling. We were hearing somebody whistling, and nobody else was there.
Yeah, it was very strange. The PA system was playing, I think, the Nutcracker Suite, and someone was whistling along, and there was no one there on the stairway, it's one of those very silent, kind of austere, beautiful mansions, and it's like, well, there's no one around, but I hear this whistling, and we mentioned it to the manager, and the manager had been there for a number of years, and he just laughed. He said, I can tell you stories about this place that, you just wouldn't believe. He said, I close at night. He told us this story. Every night he closes, and all of the lights are on separate circuits. So he says, I'll turn off all the lights on the third floor. Then he said, the elevator will come up and it'll wait for me. And the doors will open and shut and open and shut. And he said, I'm not getting on that elevator. So I take the stairs down to the next level, and I turn all the lights off at their circuits, and that damn elevator is waiting for me again. And he says, and I'm the only one in the building, and he says, and I go down to the main floor, and that elevator's waiting for me. And he goes, sometimes I see the little girl, and she's in a long dress, and she runs across in the dark in front of me and, disappears into the other room, giggling. And then he says, I'll turn those lights off. He goes, but I know, he says, after 12 years, I know I got to go all the way back upstairs because they have turned some of the lights back on.
Wow.
And he goes, every time, he goes, I have to go on all 3 floors, and he goes, and you got to turn them all back, off again,
When we first started working there, he told us he would just run out the door and run to his car because he was so afraid. And then after a while, working there a few years, it was just a ghost. So we got used to it.
Exactly, you get used to it,
So when you go to these places, obviously you take a camera with you. Do you take tape recorders, and do you walk around just to see if you get in anything, or is that not part of your?
Well, we haven't done that. We do take pictures, and we do interview the people that work there. As far as trying to get EVP, that would require an investment of some time. And like Gail said, we're not really ghost hunters.
We call ourselves ghost story hunters. We're storytellers.
Okay.
We love a good ghost story, but we just don't feel qualified. And we feel like there's so many places that do that. We're just going to sort of leave it to the experts. But then again, we're fascinated. There's this theater from the 1920s near me where there's a ghost of a lion that goes through the lobby.
Really?
And it's not the Mgm Lion. There was a circus that came to town. It's a town called Howell, Michigan. A circus came to town. A lion died and was buried nearby. And they have this lion that regularly walks through, and you can hear him. And the night that John and I were there to see what this paranormal group did, they actually had a recording of the lion's roar walking through this theater, that was fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Gail likes to point out they were not showing an MGM classic. That
Mgm Lion.
100% of us is starting. Wow.
You would be
Go ahead.
surprised just carrying a recorder and have it on. Of the stuff that you can actually catch. I have never actually heard anything with my ear. It's only on recorder. I have never seen an apparition. I have seen lights, but I've never seen a ghost. So it doesn't mean that I want to see one. but
you know,
most of the time, I'm never by myself in these places. Usually, I'm with someone. If I got just one person with me, I'm okay. But I don't like going into places by myself.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Why is that? Why don't you like that?
I grew up with my mom and my grandma telling me ghost stories from Kentucky. And ever since then, you can't get me nowhere by myself.
It's interesting. Someone like you, I think, hosting this show would be used to it by now.
Well, I'm kind of used to actually doing things, but I'm usually with somebody close by anyway. But yeah, there's only certain places that I'll go.
We often stress that if you're ghost hunting with Henry, just don't be between him and the door.
Well, you never know when you're going to find something, and I've had one experience that was shared. Gail mentioned the antique mall, which is in Jackson, which is notoriously haunted, and apparently by a number of ghosts, but most well known to be haunted by a woman they call Blanche. And they've done research that the building that the Jackson Antique Mall is in used to be a brothel. And it was run by this woman, the madam, whose name was Blanche. And they even have pictures of her. And this lady is, I guess, what you call poltergeist? Is that what you call the playful ghost? She is constantly rearranging antiques, and the people that work there are so used to her, they'll just hear rattling in the back and things moving and banging, and they'll say, Blanche, quiet down. and then it'll stop. So I went in there one day with a friend of mine, and it was pretty empty that day. We went towards the basement, which was completely deserted, and my friend said, what's the name of the ghost here? And I said, Blanche. I said, how you doing today, Blanche? And there was no one else there but me and this girl. And there was a radio playing over the PA system. And the radio, there was static on it. And the radio went dead. And we heard this voice all around us, this elder lady say, fine. And the girl I was with looked at me, and I looked at her. And she said, did you hear that? And I said, yeah. And she impersonated the voice that I had just heard. And we were just stunned because there was no one else in there, and we walked to the front of the antique mall, and I said to the lady that was working there, I said, I told her what happened, and she goes, oh yeah, that's Blanche. She talks to everybody. She said, so
wow.
It was like just nothing to them. It's like, yeah, she always talks, I guess she actually moved the ladder away from the wall once when there was a customer in there, and one of the people that worked there nonchalantly saw the ladder moving away from from the wall out of the corner of her eye, and she said, Blanche, put that back, and the ladder just moved right back to the wall, and the lady that was shopping ran out screaming.
You got a bonus shopping experience.
That's right. Yeah, you got more than you're bargaining for, but I don't know. That's kind of a fun kind of ghost. I don't know, Henry. I don't know if I'd be too worried about being in there by myself. But
well, no, there's certain places that I'll walk through, but I don't like to go into famous places in the dark. I don't see too good at night anymore, and if I had to run, I wouldn't want to kill myself.
Well, I don't blame you for that.
But I have been in some places where I've got some, great EVPs, and you don't never hear them until you go back and listen to the recorder. And a lot of times you get stuff. Someone says something or something, you're not even asking a question. You just are walking around. So it's pretty interesting. It might be beneficial to you just to carry one. That's not to say that you will catch anything. I mean, I've been in a lot of places hours and not get anything. And then sometimes you be in a place 15 minutes and catch something. So,
And,
yeah.
And you catalog these? You have a lot of these, Henry?
Oh, I got bunches of them saved.
No kidding. That's
Oh,
interesting.
yeah.
I mentioned Gerald Hunter, who wrote our introduction to our book, and he had been told from several people that they go to the cemetery and they make audio recordings, and that they pick things up. And he was kind of stunned. He said it never occurred to him to make recordings in the cemetery, because I guess he thought, well, why would they be there? They'd probably be more likely be in places where they enjoyed being,
Right.
And but I guess people have picked up things out there as well. I don't know if any of your listeners or if you guys have tried that or not, but apparently people do that.
I know people that go
it's
through.
usually too open, and we have turkeys and peacocks all over the place. So, yeah, the wildlife makes a lot of noise.
Well, you never know.
True, yeah. Before we get, we're down to about a half an hour, and I really want to talk about the lighthouses and the shipwrecks.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's, people think the Great Lakes are just little tiny ponds, and they're huge. So, and there's a lot of ships that go through there, and a lot of shipwrecks.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. And people don't realize this. We always stun the audience when we're doing our presentations, but Michigan has the most lighthouses of any state in the United States. It's depending on how you count lighthouses, there's more than 120 in the state of Michigan. And of course we have, this huge coastline on two different peninsulas. And, you will not go very far without finding a lighthouse, and you won't go any further without hearing the story of why it's haunted, right? But there's plenty of haunted lighthouse stories. And as you say, the ghost ships, more than 5,000 ships have gone under in the Great Lakes. And as you say, they're not ponds. I mean, the deepest one is Lake Superior. It's 1,200 feet deep, and some of them are more than 100 miles across. So, you are looking at freshwater oceans. And we talk quite a bit about a lot of the ghost ships. The most famous one is probably Cadillac's ship from the 1600s, and Le Griffon. And that disappeared on its maiden voyage in the 1600s when it went from Detroit to Green Bay, and it never returned. And they've never found it to this day. They're still looking for the Griffin, but people claim they see it, and that's where you get into the story of the Flying Dutchman. You see the ship that's supposedly been sunk for years, But there's a lot of ships in Michigan that are called Flying Dutchmen. They'll see them in the fog. They'll see them in the storm. And, people know that they sank, 100 years ago.
And from what I understand, in the spring, when you get a lot of the snow thawing out and the pour off, is you can see ships at the bottom of the lake sometimes.
Yes.
Doing an aerial shot.
Yes, you can, and some of the water is very clear, and you can even take these excursions now with the glass bottom boats, and they'll go on a lot of these shipwreck hunts where they're in kind of shallow water, and then there's the ones that are in the deep water that you probably can see more on a clear day as well. But if you go out on YouTube, you can see a lot of people have done filming of some of their research on the ships that sank in the Great Lakes. You can actually visit a haunted ship now in Michigan. The USS Edson, which is a Vietnam-era destroyer, is in Bay City. And that's notoriously haunted. And the people that work there will tell you all about it, too. But, you know, you'll be walking through there taking a tour, and you'll hear footsteps clattering along and people on the PA, and there's nobody there, you know. And the funniest thing about that, we joke about, but people always say that they'll be coming back from the tour, and a lot of times their car is running in the parking lot.
Which in Michigan is really handy in the winter, that your car is suddenly started. It's fascinating because you really can't go on many of these destroyers, and that's Bay City has quite a bit of haunted places as well. And just about any lighthouse we visited in Michigan, again, had a haunted story because of the hard work of the lighthouse keepers and the fact that they lived and most of them died there. Everything from this one lighthouse keeper in Solchois had people still smell cigar smoke, even though nobody smoked there in years and years and years. But there's pungent cigar smoke. The old lighthouse keeper used to love to smoke a cigar, and people smell it on a regular basis. So it's there's just a lot of really quirky, interesting lighthouse-related stories. We have a lot of those in the book.
Is that the one where the people try to take pictures of the costume guard? Costume
yeah,
guy?
that's one where they have people will regularly see a guy wearing period clothes, and they think he's a guide, and then they go up to talk to him, and he disappears. It's one of the lighthouse keepers who wanders the ground, and people think he's a tour guide wearing an old pea coat. Wow. You know, that's another. Yeah.
What lighthouse is that one at?
What's that?
Which lighthouse is that one?
Oh, that is the Solchois Light, and it's
Lake Michigan.
Yeah, it's in Gulliver, Michigan, and Solchois is French for last choice, I believe.
Only choice.
Yeah, only choice. If you were looking for a safe haven in a storm, that was a little inlet off of the lake there. But that's considered a very actively haunted lighthouse. And as Gail said, you know, most of them are considered haunted. In fact, we had one up near the St. Mary's River there on Lake Superior that the story was kind of gruesome, and we had to take it out of our show because there were a lot of children at it. But the story was that this little girl, the lighthouse keeper's little girl, disappeared, and they realized that a bear must have eaten her. And when they killed the bear, you know, they found the little girl inside the bear, and they think that little girl is haunting the lighthouse. And that didn't go over well with the little kids in the library.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
This has been fun for us in the sense that we never had a book that kids liked so much, and we realized the reason kids like it is you can learn about history by learning about all these places in Michigan. So parents really like it. It's sort of an educational book about haunting because they're learning about all the places around them in Michigan. It's kind of fun.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, very much so. And
Sure.
I had no idea there were that many lighthouses. We think of the lighthouses, especially with saltwater lighthouses. The ocean doesn't freeze up. Lake Michigan, Lake Superior freeze up, so you have that whole ice flow as well, which must have been brutal for these guys.
Right, and they're very cold lakes. Even Lake Superior, you're not even really supposed to swim in the summertime. You know, I think which is the lake where the Edmund Fitzgerald went down, obviously, and they're very deep and very treacherous. You get storms up that way. In fact, that was part of the legend of Minnie Quay. I think I don't know if you've heard of it, Gail. You know,
it's considered really one of Michigan's oldest legends. A girl. This was in the 1800s. This was a real girl. We have a picture of her grave in the book. And in 1876, this girl named Minnie Quay, another thing where her parents didn't like her boyfriend, and her town was watching her walk. She walked down the pier and jumped into the lake and drowned herself out of despair. And to this day, people see this girl in the lake waving people into the lake. And people have drowned because they see someone out there and they think she's drowning and they jump in only to drown themselves. And songs have been written about her. And, it's considered one of Michigan's oldest legends, but it makes it interesting when someone is really real. There is the grave nearby that her body was buried in, but her spirit still lives on.
And the pylons of the pier she walked off is still there. It's kind of a creepy place, but her boyfriend, perished in a storm in Lake Huron, which is why she walked off the pier, and which was a way of life then. If you were a seaman, or I don't know if you'd call it a seaman on the lakes, but if you worked the lakes on the ships.
A sailor, John.
Yeah, sailor. Oh, yeah. If you were sailing the lakes, though, it was a very dangerous job. And, it was not, you didn't have a long life expectancy necessarily.
No. Are there still rumors and myths about washed up sailors that maybe have drowned in the lakes?
Well, there's a lot of, you can look up a lot of the Great Lakes shipwrecks. And there's the old saying, I think that even in the song on the Edmund Fitzgerald, the old legend that the lakes don't give up their dead. That's an old legend that goes way back.
In the Upper Peninsula, in a place called Whitefish Point, there's a shipwreck museum that has a lot of those legends, and it's a wonderful place to visit because Lake Superior, isn't it, John? I think it's one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world, isn't it?
Yes, it's the second largest.
Yeah, it's a very treacherous lake, obviously, where the Edmund Fitzgerald. So it's a fascinating museum in Whitefish Point. Again, if you ever come to Michigan to see some of the it's such a treacherous, deep, cold lake. And it's fascinating to hear the history of it and to go to this museum and see some of the artifacts from these shipwrecks.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, George Steinbrenner's great-grandfather was a shipbuilder from Cleveland, I think. And he went down on one of the ghost ships back in the 1890s. So we've lost a lot of even famous people in those Great Lakes.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
You got
that was part of the fun of writing the book, though, is sharing some of these stories.
You got the
I can imagine.
Fort, was it Gratoit Lighthouse?
The Gratiot.
Okay.
Fort Gratiot, yes.
Okay.
Fort Gratiot.
I butcher words.
That's okay. It's a hard word to pronounce.
You know what? We've butchered it over the years because that's a French word, and Gratiot is not how it was pronounced. There's a lot of French, of course, the French settled.
There's a lighthouse, a more interesting lighthouse is there's one where the light has been gone for years, but people still see it lit up. And that's been in the news. It's John, which lighthouse is that? That one is fascinating because they took out the lens. There's no electricity yet. At night, people still see the light coming from the lighthouse. That's really spooky.
That's the old Presqu'île light near Alpena. And, they still have news programs where they'll actually film the light on, and there's no physical way that the light's working.
Huh.
And seamen will see it out to sea, and it's just a strange phenomenon. They can't explain it, but you can see it yourself, and...
Not to give it a plug, but we will give it a plug. Our same publisher has actually published a book that's just Haunted Lighthouses of Michigan. There's that many lighthouses that this woman wrote a whole book just on Haunted Lighthouses of Michigan.
Wow.
Yeah. So many stories. I mean, we tried to cover some of them and some of the ships, but, you could, like Gail said, you could spend a whole book on all of that. And each one is fascinating. I mean, there's murder mysteries in some of these lighthouses. And the one up near Marquette always fascinated me because they see a little girl looking out the window of the lighthouse, the keeper's house, and they'll go in there and there's no one in there. And it's kind of a sad, silent story. It's like, what is she looking for? She's like, what happened to everybody?
could be waiting for.
And none of these lighthouses are occupied today.
Most of them are not. There are some that are automated. There are some that are just decommissioned in museums. And there are some that are still run by the Coast Guard. And there are a few that if you go on certain websites, you can actually volunteer to be a lighthouse keeper and get put on a list where you can actually live there for a week or two. So you just have to go one to another and kind of do some investigation on it.
There's a couple that are bed and breakfasts.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
So definitely visit. Well, before we run out of time, please explain the Red Dwarf.
I'll try and do it quickly. The Nain Rouge, that's the oldest legend in the book and the oldest legend in Detroit. Cadillac, who founded Detroit in 1700, it said he was walking down the street, he saw a little red imp with sharp teeth, and he hit it with his cane. And then the dwarf, the little red dwarf called Nain Rouge, put a curse on the city. And it's one of these enduring legends where every time something bad happens in Detroit, people claim to see a red dwarf. Even as recently as a snowstorm about 20 years ago, people claimed to have seen a red dwarf. During the Detroit riots of 1967, even during Detroit burned in 1805, the entire city burned. People claimed, there's records that people claimed to have seen the red dwarf. But it's interesting, over the years, people have decided to celebrate the Red Dwarf, and we have our own version of Mardi Gras. In the spring, they have a parade. John and I went to it in 2019. 10,000 people showed up, and they have a parade to try and drive the Red Dwarf out of the city. They even have a beer. There's all kinds of tributes to the Nain Rouge, but it's interesting that to this day, if anything bad happens in Detroit, people will go online, and there's even a Facebook page for the Red Dwarf, and that's a symbol. It's a symbol for Detroit, and it's we find it very interesting, the old legend of the Nain Rouge.
Wow.
So if you come in the spring, come to our parade, and we can drive the dwarf out together. We don't want anything bad to happen to Detroit.
Wow.
It's actually a lot of fun. They have a fella dressed up as the dwarf, and he'll speak in the entrance of the Masonic Temple, which is the world's largest Masonic temple in Detroit there. Everything leads to there, and everyone is dressed up in costume. It's just a really grand time. I think it's March, isn't it? March when it usually is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. It's kind of like the Mothman.
Yes, the Mothman or the Dogman, or the fact that it's endured from 1700. That's what's so incredible about it, that there's books that have references to the Red Dwarf. So it's not just something that was made up out of thin air. There's actually historical documents where people claim to have seen the dwarf, and the fact that Cadillac he ended up broke. He sort of was cursed himself. So if you're going anywhere and you see a little red dwarf, do not hit him with your cane. Just go easy on him, because you just never know. That's good. That's a good policy.
Just step aside.
What are you supposed to do? I mean, you're supposed to, say hi, or?
I think running would be a good choice.
Run.
I don't know. You can't walk up and go, "Hi, kitty." Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think that would work.
Well,
that's fascinating. I hadn't heard of a lot of the stories that are in your book are quite original, and it's a delightful read.
Thank you. We had fun doing it, and we love the fact, again, like, that people can just throw it in their glove compartment, and if they're up in Dowagiac or anywhere, you just open up the book and say, oh, there's a haunted site here. Let's go see for ourselves. That's, anybody who's a skeptic, we're saying you don't have to believe in ghosts to read this book or go to any of these places. Find out for yourself. And if nothing else, even if you don't see ghosts, you'll enjoy seeing a building that has some wonderful history to it. You'll see another part of Michigan. It's it's a great way to see the state through that lens. And then we always ask people, we have a Facebook page, Michigan Haunts Book, and anybody out there that wants to contact us, we would love to hear your stories. We sell our books through there as well, and our Gmail is Michigan Haunts Book, Haunts plural, at Gmail. And we love when people tell us stories, post pictures, anything. Please, we'd love to have a two-way discussion with people. So we would love to hear from people out there in Michigan or anywhere in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, it doesn't matter what you take with you, tape recorders, cameras, or whatever. I mean, you know, we've had some experiences just by walking around. So you just never know, right? And
Yeah.
Though it's always interesting to see what they come up with on these programs.
You know, when we go and do these presentations, people are embarrassed to tell us their haunted stories a lot of times. They're embarrassed in front of their friends. So sometimes people will leave the room and then someone will stay after and kind of sneak up to us and go, I had a haunted experience in my house. And they sort of confide in us, you know, because we love to hear people's stories. So we just find that fascinating that people, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's something to be celebrated. And that's why we ask people to reach out to us to hear their stories. We're story collectors. Who knows what's out there?
Well, you figure so many people that's lived and died, most of their spirits are just wandering around, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
No telling where they're at.
Yes.
And I guess
It's interesting.
if you can travel around once you're dead, you know, now you can go see all these places that you've never been.
Right. And the other great part of the book is that we didn't have to fact check it, except for dates. We don't need to fact check it. But again, that's how you hear of other things. It's all, look, the show you're doing, you spread the word about these stories and people tell other stories. It's a great way for the world to become connected, you know, and hearing things in different places. It makes me intrigued to hear about people talk about other states. I think, well, maybe I want to go there and hear some of those stories. So what a wonderful way to travel the country and the world by hearing some of these paranormal tales.
Yeah.
And the book is diverse enough that, you know, you can pick up on different things like Houdini or the Ford Museum.
Right.
So that if you're interested in even just one little topic, there's a lot you can jump into.
Right.
Oh,
like haunted theaters. We love haunted theaters, and there's plenty of them. Even one in the UP where an old Polish actress is up in the balcony and she whispers, when actors forget their lines, she whispers to them from the balcony, whispers their lines. So much wonderful, wonderful tales because people have enjoyed things in these theaters. So they're always really heartwarming and charming.
Absolutely. It just covers all kinds of ground. Gail tells about the Purple Gang, the notorious Purple Gang, and there's a lot of places haunted by them. You know, just everything that might interest people, there's something that touches on it.
Yeah. And we have lots of different authors on with talking about locations that's haunted all around the United States. And we like those kinds of stories also because it lets people understand that there's more than just one little place. I mean, they're all over the place. And it gives you history.
We even have a haunted library in Detroit it's haunted, and it was built over the site of a former jail. And so people regularly hear chains rattling and they see prisoners wandering around. And I always think, you know, it must be hard to shush them in the library because they're wandering around. So we even have a lot of haunted libraries in the book, if that's one of your things you're into as well. We have a diversity of ghosts there.
Well, our time is kind of dwindling on down. I don't guess we really have a lot of time.
That went fast.
I know. 2 hours and it goes by fast. That's because we like to have fun.
Yeah, that was very, very fun.
So,
did you have any other questions we didn't get to, Henry?
Well, I'm curious as to what's the next project.
Well,
We have not decided on that yet, but we will definitely keep you posted, especially if it has a haunted story to it. But we may do another version of this book, so who knows? And then we'd love to come back, so we will keep you posted. But
definitely.
please go to our Facebook page, Michigan Haunts Book, to interact with us. We really.
I have that link in the chat room, so people can.
Oh, I do have a question.
Thank you.
What is the name of your cute little bird?
Oh my gosh, that's Hank Greenbird. He's my canary wing baby parrot.
I know who Hank Greenberg is.
Yes. Well, we're very fond of, Hank Greenberg here in Detroit.
Yes. He could clobber home runs.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've always been a big baseball fan of, I like the old baseball teams and players. It's fascinating to research all those.
Yes, actually, we're doing a presentation on US 12, which is Michigan Avenue, the home of the old Tiger Stadium.
Oh, really?
That's one of our, that's our next big presentation is Michigan Avenue. And there's a lot of Coney Islands and all kinds of things, but the old Tiger Stadium.
And you would be surprised at how many of those old stadiums are actually haunted.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Did not know that.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. We had a guy
They're
on.
haunted by steel popcorn.
We had a guy on one time about haunted baseball stadiums.
Really?
Yeah, it's been quite a few years back we had him. Yeah. All right, our time is dwindled right on down. We got about 2 minutes left. I want to give you guys a chance to give out all your information where they can contact you and follow you, and then stay on till after we're off, and we'll thank you and talk to you a few minutes.
Okay, that's great. So the name of our book is Michigan Haunts, Public Places, Eerie Spaces. It's from Arcadia Publishing. You can get it on Arcadia or on Amazon or other book places. Our Facebook is Michigan Haunts Book. And then our Gmail, our email, if you don't feel like Facebook, is Michigan Haunts Book, Haunts plural, michiganhauntsbook@gmail.com. So in one of those places, you can hopefully contact us. And if you want to get signed copies of our book, please just reach out to us at our Facebook page or our Gmail, and we'd be happy to send you one. But we just love to hear from you. So please reach out to us and let us know what you think.
All right, sounds very good. Great show.
Thanks for having us.
And very great to be with you all. Thank you so much for listening. We have a lot of fun doing this.
You're very welcome. And
I learned a lot.
Yeah, we got just about a half a minute left here. So, Barbara, you want to give out all of our information? Or
you can find us at theparanormalview.com.
There you go. And we will.
We're on Facebook.
Yes. And you can.
Go ahead.
You can also get on the Paranormal View and listen to past shows. And you can we do replays during the week of our show here on Para X also. So.
It's especially the best show, but oh.
And according to the news, it's snowing in Lansing, Michigan right now. Sorry, folks.
All right.
All right. Our time is up. We'll see you guys next week at the same time. So this is Henry Foister.
Jeffrey Gould.
And Barbara Duncan.
So good night, everybody. You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the Para X Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the Paranormal